I remember the first time I met her. Lacey. She stepped through my front door like it already belonged to her hips, swaying arms, wide voice, sugar sweet. "Oh my gosh, Mrs. Dalton, your home is adorable. It just feels so cozy." There it was, the first red flag. That too sweet tone paired with the way her eyes scanned the living room, lingering too long on the framed photo of me and my late husband, the leather recliner he used to sit in, the grandfather clock that had belonged to my parents. I'd only just pulled the plastic wrap off the apple pie when she offered to help clean the kitchen. "Let me rinse those dishes for you," she chirped, already sliding into the sink like she owned the place. I'm not unkind. I'm not paranoid. But I've learned something: over 6 decades of living, women like Lacey don't do anything without a reason. James, my only son, was smiling beside her like a man who thought he'd found gold. He'd met her 3 months earlier at a tech conference in Austin, and from the way he talked, you'd think she descended from the heavens just to save him from bachelorhood. "She's smart, Mom. She runs her own business, does consulting for startups. You'd love her." Maybe. But love isn't built in 3 months. Not the kind you trust with your life. Or your legacy. Still, I smiled politely. I let her sit on my couch, touch the antique lamp, ask about the photo albums. But what really deeply caught me, was how her eyes flicked toward the wall safe. Not long. Just a half second. A glance. But I saw it. Most guests never notice it. That night, after they'd left, I sat on the edge of my bed with a strange sensation I hadn't felt since my husband's funeral. Vulnerability. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a cold breeze that slithered through my ribs and whispered, "Be careful. She's not here just for your son." The next week, James came by again. Just him this time. He hugged me, a quick, one-armed thing, and made a show of opening the pantry. "Still stocking the same tea, huh?" he muttered with a grin. We sat at the kitchen table just like always. But the conversation took a strange turn. "Mom, do you still have the deed to the house somewhere safe?" he asked in the most casual voice he could muster. I paused. "Of course I do," I said. "Why?" He shrugged, sipping his tea. "No reason. Just, in case something happens. Might be smart to have it digital. You could lose paper documents in a fire." I raised an eyebrow. "Why would that come up now?" He looked away. "Just being responsible. Lacey says it's good to think ahead." Ah, there it was. I smiled and nodded, but inside my stomach knotted up. Something told me Lacey's influence wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. A few days later, Lacey showed up again. This time she brought flowers, lilies, which I'm allergic to. I smiled anyway and put them in the sink. She had a folder tucked under her arm. "Mrs. Dalton, I've been working on some forms for my own family. Just emergency planning. I thought maybe I could help you fill some out too. Medical directives, power of attorney. It's just good to have." My hands went still on the countertop. She opened the folder and slid some pages toward me. At first glance, they looked official. Medical authorizations, emergency contact forms. Then a page that made my breath catch. Transfer of title, residential property. Recipient Lacey R. Monroe. I looked up slowly. She was still smiling. I didn't say a word. I picked up the paper, pretending to scan it. Then I calmly placed it on the counter, right side up. "I think you gave me the wrong form," I said. She laughed. "Oh, did I? Sorry, I've been juggling so many client documents, it's easy to get them mixed up." But her eyes? Her eyes were watching me. Not the paper, not the folder. Me. Testing me. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out the old tin box where I kept the letters my husband wrote me before he passed. I hadn't opened them in years. One was marked, "In case you're ever unsure about people." I opened it. Inside were 2 paragraphs written in his slanted hand. He talked about the house, about how he'd grown up poor and how much it meant to him that we built this place together, about how it needed to stay in the family, but only with someone who truly cherished it. "If someone tries to take it from you with charm, guilt, or strategy, don't hand it over, no matter what. Especially not for love that doesn't feel earned." I clutched the letter like a lifeline. Lacey wasn't just a threat. She was a storm in heels and lip gloss, and she thought I'd go quietly. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The next morning, James showed up unannounced, holding 2 coffees and wearing the smile of a man trying to pretend nothing was wrong. I took the coffee, even though I could already feel the tension tightening around my shoulders like a belt. He sat at the kitchen table tapping his fingers on the wood, a habit he picked up as a child whenever he was about to ask for something he knew I wouldn't like. "Mom," he said, clearing his throat. "Lacey told me you might have gotten confused about those forms she showed you." I didn't reply right away. I took a slow sip even though the coffee had already gone lukewarm. "She said you thought it was a deed transfer, but it was actually just a draft. Something she'd saved by mistake." I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were tired. Not just from lack of sleep. From conflict. From guilt he hadn't yet admitted to himself. "And you believed her?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "She's not trying to take your house, Mom. She just thinks you've been living here alone a long time. You could use some help organizing things. I mean, you're not exactly what I asked." His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That evening, I stood by the hallway mirror and stared at myself. I traced the creases by my mouth, the faint sag under my eyes, the gray in my hair. They think I'm slipping. That's the narrative Lacey is building, isn't it? The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law trying to help her poor, forgetful future mother-in-law before she makes a mistake and loses everything. She's painting me as unstable, fading, vulnerable. It's the most dangerous kind of manipulation, the one that smiles as it cuts. I tried to shake it off. I busied myself with chores. I folded laundry. I baked a lemon cake. I cleaned the silverware drawer, something I hadn't done in months. That's when I noticed it. The key to the fireproof box in my bedroom was missing. At first I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. I checked my purse, my jewelry box, even the laundry basket. Nothing. That key had only one purpose: opening the metal box that contained my deed will and all the original legal documents tied to the property. Suddenly, every smile, every question, every helpful suggestion Lacey had made became razor-sharp in my memory. The next day, I called James and told him to stop by after work. I didn't tell him why. When he arrived, Lacey was with him, of course. She was dressed like she always was, just a little too polished for a casual visit. Hair curled, makeup flawless, soft cashmere cardigan hugging her like a warm lie. I invited them both into the living room. "James," I said calmly, "I need to ask you something. Has Lacey been in my bedroom recently?" He blinked. "What?" "No. Why would she?" I turned to her. "Because my key is missing. The one that unlocks the safe with all my property documents." Her smile didn't even flicker. "Oh, Maggie, you must have just misplaced it. I'm happy to help you look." "I'm not asking you to help," I said, voice still calm. "I'm asking if you've been in my bedroom." Her tone changed. Just a little. A hint of steel beneath the sugar. "That's a strange accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said. "It's a question." James stood up. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're acting—" "Don't say I'm acting paranoid," I said flatly. "Not when I know what I keep track of in my own house. The key was there last week. Now it's not. And Lacey is the only person who's been here alone." Silence. Then Lacey said smoothly, "Well, if you don't trust me, Maggie, maybe I shouldn't be here." "That's your choice," I replied. James looked between us. "Can we just not do this right now?" I stared at him. My son. My boy. And I saw it clearly, he was already drifting. Not because he didn't love me, but because she was making him believe I was the one slipping away. And he didn't have the strength to question her. Later that night, after they left, I sat at my desk and opened a new notepad. I wrote down every conversation I could remember with Lacey since the day I met her. Every strange question. Every offhand comment, every instance that seemed minor at the time now screaming for attention. By the time I finished, it was a full 2 pages, tight handwriting, no space wasted. I tucked it away in a locked drawer. Then I made a decision. If they were going to treat me like I was fragile, I'd give them the performance of a lifetime until I had enough proof to protect everything my husband and I had built. This wasn't just my home, it was my fortress. And Lacey. She'd just walked into a war she didn't understand. A few days passed in uneasy silence. James didn't call. Lacey didn't visit. For a moment, I wondered if they'd backed off. Maybe the confrontation rattled them enough to make them reconsider. But then came the knock. It was Lacey standing on my porch with a soft smile and a reusable grocery bag on her shoulder. "I brought you a few things," she said cheerfully. "Thought we could make dinner together. Just the girls." I almost said no, but something in her tone made me pause. Letting her in meant I could watch her, hear what she said when she thought she was winning. And that was valuable. So I stepped aside and let her in. She moved around the kitchen like she'd been here her whole life, pulling out pans, chopping vegetables, humming a tune I didn't recognize. "I know things have been tense," she said as she stirred the sauce. "I just want us to get along. James loves you. And I love James." I kept my voice neutral. "You two seem very close." She nodded, smiling. "We are. That's why I want to make sure he's protected." The air chilled. "Protected?" I asked. "Financially," she said quickly. "You know, just in case anything ever happened. Or if the house became a burden." It's a lot for one woman to manage Maggie. There it was, wrapped in sweetness, dipped in concern. She was doing it again, planting seeds, trying to turn my legacy into a liability. I set down my glass of water. "Do you think the house is too much for me?" Lacey tilted her head. "I just worry. What if you fell? Or if something broke and no one was around to help? It's an old house. You don't have to carry that alone." She smiled like a woman offering a lifeline, but I heard the undertone. "Give it to us. Let us take care of it for you. For your own good." After dinner, as she cleaned up, she pulled a folded brochure from her purse and slid it across the table. "Just something to consider," she said. It was a pamphlet for an assisted living community. She didn't even look embarrassed. "I toured it with my grandmother before she passed," she said casually. "They have full-time staff, social activities, transportation, and the rooms are beautiful. I thought of you." I looked down at the cover. A smiling gray-haired woman holding a teacup. Beneath it, freedom from stress, safety for the future. When I looked back up, Lacey was watching me with wide, innocent eyes. I didn't react. I just smiled. "Thank you," I said, folding the brochure. "I'll think about it." "Oh, good," she said brightly, "because James and I were actually thinking if you ever did decide to make a change, we could keep the house in the family. We'd take great care of it." She picked up her purse, slung it over her shoulder. "And if you ever want help with paperwork or anything, just ask. I have experience handling estates." Estates. Not homes. Not families. Estates. After she left, I sat on the couch in silence. The brochure in my hand felt like a slap. Not because of what it offered, but because of what it assumed. That I was ready to go. That I was no longer capable of holding my own life in my own hands. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd stepped over it, danced on it, and planted a flag. That night, I went to James's apartment. He looked surprised to see me. "I need to talk to you," I said. He let me in, and for a few seconds I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who used to run to the porch to greet me after school. The boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee and only Mom could make it better. But now he was different. Colder. Shaped by someone else's words. "What is it?" he asked, sitting across from me. I placed the brochure on the table between us. "She gave me this," I said. His jaw tightened. She says it's because she cares, that the house is too much for me, that you two would keep it in the family if I moved out. He didn't speak. I leaned forward. James, do you even hear how that sounds? Like I'm just a stepping stone, an obstacle to be managed. Finally, he looked at me. She's just trying to help. No, I said quietly. She's trying to replace me. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe. But it was gone as fast as it came. She just wants security, he said. She grew up poor, Mom. Her mom lost everything to medical bills. She's scared of not having a foundation. I nodded. So she wants mine. He rubbed his temples. You're reading into things. No, I said, standing. I'm finally seeing them clearly. I left the apartment without another word. If my son wouldn't protect me, I would protect myself. Later that week, I started searching through the file cabinets for any other documents that might be vulnerable. That's when I found it. A manila envelope tucked behind the tax folders, sealed and labeled in my late husband's handwriting. If she tries to take the house. I opened it slowly. Inside, copies of the deed, legal addendums, notarized letters, and one handwritten note from my husband. Maggie, if anyone ever tries to charm, lie, or manipulate their way into our home, don't reason with them. Document, record, defend. This house was built with sweat and sacrifice. Protect it with the same. My hands trembled. He had known. And now so did I. The next time Lacey came over, she brought a smile and a thick folder. This is just something I put together to help you, she said. Basic forms, power of attorney, end-of-life instructions, beneficiary updates. Just smart things to get ahead of. I filled some of them out already to save you time. She laid the folder on the kitchen table like she was offering me a gift. I took it without a word. Sat. Opened it. The top pages were standard medical release forms and emergency contact list. But beneath that, things began to twist. Property assignment papers, authorization to transfer financial authority, a revised title deed template with my full name and her listed as the designated co-resident. It was all blank where my signature would go, of course, but the intention wasn't blank at all. Every page screamed one word: ownership. She was trying to make it look like I'd agreed slowly, quietly, step by step, and if I hadn't been careful, I might have. Just one rushed signature, one distracted moment. That's all it would have taken. I looked up. She was pretending to check her phone, but I saw her glance at me sideways, brief, sharp. I closed the folder. Lacey, I said, these are serious documents. She looked up, smiling. I know. That's why I thought I could help. James said you don't like dealing with legal stuff. I don't like being ambushed, I said. The smile froze for a split second, then returned. No ambush. Just support. You raised James alone. You deserve someone to help now. It was such a subtle weapon, her sweetness, polished like a blade. She made herself the caregiver, the daughter I never had, the one who'd take over not out of greed, but out of love. Fake love. That night, I called my old lawyer, Mr. Halperin, a man I hadn't spoken to since my husband passed. I told him everything. The change in James, the papers, the way Lacey maneuvered with plausible deniability. He didn't sound surprised. People like her don't break in, he said. They decorate your prison first. Make you feel like it's your idea to hand over the keys. He invited me to come in quietly. No paper trail, no email, just one-on-one. When I arrived the next morning, I carried a copy of everything she'd given me. He looked through the folder page by page, making quiet notes. When he reached the co-residency title transfer template, he stopped. This one's dangerous, he said. If you had signed this and filed it, even accidentally, she'd have a legitimate claim to partial ownership. I felt the chill of it run through my chest. She hadn't miscalculated. She'd planned it down to the smallest detail. What do? I asked. He leaned back, tapping the paper. You do what smart women do, he said. You don't fight this with shouting. You fight it with structure, with silence, and with protection. He helped me draft a countermeasure, a protective legal clause that would override any unauthorized attempts to transfer ownership without direct notarized confirmation. We added it to the deed, we updated the will, and then we created a digital alert system. Any search change or inquiry about the property would ping me and my lawyer instantly. Then he looked at me and said, "Don't confront her. Let her think you're considering it. Let her reveal more." So I did. Over the next few days, I pretended to be more open. I made small talk. I asked her if she'd help me fill in a few blanks in the paperwork. She was eager, giddy almost. She came over with highlighters, sticky notes tabs. She said, "You're doing the right thing. You're thinking about the future." I nodded, played the part. Then I asked if I could sleep on it. "Just need to read everything carefully," I told her. Of course, she chirped. "Take your time." But the next morning, I caught her in the hallway outside my study where I had kept the folder hidden behind the books on my shelf. She said she was looking for the bathroom. The bathroom was on the other side of the house. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't waiting for me to sign. She was waiting for a moment when I wouldn't notice she'd signed it for me. I moved the folder into a fireproof lockbox, hid the key, changed the hiding place every night. And then for insurance, I took photos of every document, saved them to a USB. Then I saved a backup in cloud storage with a friend I trusted, a woman who owed me a favor from long ago. If Lacey wanted this house, she'd have to fight me. And I wasn't scared of fighting anymore. I was angry. But the worst part, James didn't ask. He didn't ask if she was pressuring me. He didn't ask what was in the folder. He didn't even ask how I felt. He just said, "I know she's pushy, but she means well. You're overthinking it." That broke something in me. My son wasn't just ignoring the truth. He was protecting her over me. And whether he realized it or not, that betrayal cut deeper than any signature ever could. The next time I saw James, he looked tired. His eyes were shadowed, his shirt wrinkled. He came by alone, no Lacey in sight, and carried a plastic bag with 2 takeout containers. "I brought Thai," he said. "Your favorite." I knew the tactic. Feed me, soften me, keep things light. We sat at the kitchen table and ate in near silence, chopsticks clicking against plastic. Then finally he said, "Lacey told me you've been feeling uneasy about the paperwork." I didn't answer. He went on, "She's not trying to take advantage of you, Mom. She's trying to help." "Help how?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just make sure things are in order. She said you got upset when she brought over the emergency planning forms." I took a slow breath. "James," I said carefully, "you do realize one of those forms was a property transfer, don't you?" He looked confused for a second, or pretended to be. "She said that was a mistake. It wasn't even filled out. Because she wanted me to fill it out." He didn't speak. I asked her about it. She laughed it off, then brought over a brochure for an assisted living facility. He looked down. "She's planning a future that doesn't include me in my own home." I said, each word deliberate. "And you're letting her." The room felt colder. He stirred the rice in his container, not meeting my eyes. "Do you love her?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "I do." "And does she love you?" He looked up then, and for a moment I saw doubt flicker in his expression. "I think so." "Think," I repeated softly. He put down his fork. "Mom, what do you want me to say? That you're right, and she's using me?" "I don't believe that. She's just strong. Forward. You're not used to that. She's not just forward, James. She's manipulative. She tried to get me to sign over the house. Whether she said it directly or not, that was her intent." He rubbed his temples, sighing. "She's worried about our future. She thinks I've spent too long renting, that I deserve something stable. And this house is mine," I said sharply. "Your father and I built this life. Every nail, every photo on the wall, every plant in the yard, they're part of who I am. And who you are. I stood. I'm not dead. And I'm not incompetent. And I will not be handled. He didn't argue. He just stood, gathered the empty containers, and left. And when the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 2 days later, Lacey came back. No warning. She arrived in a silk blouse and black slacks like she was headed to court. Her face was carefully neutral. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, standing at the door with a small leather portfolio in hand. I didn't invite her in, but she stepped inside anyway. "I understand your concerns," she said smoothly. "I really do. But I think you've misunderstood my intentions." I crossed my arms. "I never wanted your house," she said. "I wanted to make sure James had some kind of stability if anything happened to you." "That's not a crime. It's not illegal," I agreed. "But it is calculating." She smiled that cool, practiced smile. "You're right to be protective. But eventually, Maggie, things change. People age. You can't hold on to everything forever." I narrowed my eyes. "Is that a threat?" Her smile dropped. "It's a reality," she said flatly. "And the sooner you accept that, the easier things will be." I took a step closer. "Let me be very clear, Lacey. I know what you're doing. I've spoken to my lawyer. I've reviewed every piece of paper you gave me. I've documented everything, the forms, the conversations, even your little hallway detour near my study." Her eyes widened just slightly. "And I've protected this house," I said. "Legally, securely, and permanently." She said nothing. I continued. "If you come near my documents again or attempt to involve James in your schemes, I'll treat it as attempted fraud. And I won't be quiet about it." For a long moment she said nothing. Then with icy calm, she turned on her heel. As she reached the door, she muttered, "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm correcting one." And I shut the door behind her. That night, I sat in the living room alone. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy because I knew what was coming next. People like Lacey don't quit. They escalate. And I had a feeling the next move wouldn't be subtle. She'd tried charm, then guilt, then pressure. The next step would be war. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. She thought I was weak because I lived alone. She thought I was old and easily swayed. She forgot I've buried a husband, raised a son, held a job for 40 years, paid every mortgage bill on time, survived grief and betrayal and loneliness. I am not someone you push out of her own home. I am the house, and I am staying. After Lacey's visit, the air in my home changed. The silence became sharper, like the walls were listening, watching, waiting. I started locking my bedroom door at night, something I hadn't done since James was a child and afraid of thunderstorms. I checked the safe every morning. The documents were still there untouched, but I didn't trust that they would stay that way for long. People like Lacey don't accept no easily. They don't walk away empty-handed, they pivot, recalculate, attack from a different angle. And sure enough, just 2 days later, the next attempt came. This time, through James. He called early, 7:42 a.m. to be exact. I remember because I was halfway through steeping my tea. "Mom," he said, "can I stop by with some paperwork? Lacey and I are just trying to get a few things organized for our future." I didn't ask questions. I told him to come over. But I was ready this time. When they arrived, James looked nervous. Lacey looked rehearsed. She handed me a manila envelope. "Just a couple of things that need quick signatures." I opened it slowly, never breaking eye contact. Inside were 3 documents. One was a healthcare proxy with James listed as the sole decision-maker. One was a financial authorization form giving Lacey permission to streamline financial decisions in case of emergencies. The last one, a new will template. Mine, already typed. My name filled in, date included, all blank, except one field real property to be inherited by Lacey Monroe. I didn't speak for a long time. James started to fidget. Lacey, on the other hand, just smiled. I thought it would save you time, she said. I've worked with a few estate lawyers, and this kind of prep helps avoid probate issues. I stood slowly and walked to the kitchen counter. I didn't tear the papers. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened the top drawer, pulled out a small digital voice recorder, and pressed play. The audio was fuzzy at first, but then clear. Her voice. From the hallway 2 weeks ago. I don't care if she signs willingly or not. James is too soft to do what's needed, so I'll handle it. That house is as good as mine. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. James looked at her. Confused. Betrayed. His mouth opened, then closed. Lacey, her mask cracked. You recorded me? She asked, her voice low and cold. I protected myself, I said. Something I should have done sooner. She turned to James. She took it out of context, she said quickly. You know how your mom twists things? He looked sick. I didn't even know you said that, he whispered. She grabbed his arm, but he pulled away. This is ridiculous, she snapped. She's setting me up. I handed her the envelope of forms. Then feel free to take these and leave. James looked at me, eyes wide. Mom. I love you, I said. But I will not let you bring poison into my home. And if you stand beside her now, then you're no longer protecting your future, you're destroying it. She turned to leave, heels stabbing into the floor with every step. James lingered. I didn't know, he said quietly. But you didn't ask, I replied. And with that, he followed her out the door. That evening, I went to the study, the one my husband and I used to sit in every Sunday morning with coffee and the newspaper. I pulled out an old drawer and found a letter tucked in the back. One I hadn't read since the week after he died. It was addressed simply to my Maggie. I opened it with careful fingers. Inside he wrote, if you ever feel alone or doubt yourself, remember this. You built everything from the ground up. You raised our boy with strength. This house doesn't just stand because of bricks. It stands because of you. I pressed the paper to my heart, and I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I knew even in death he still believed in me. Later that night, I locked the doors, turned out the lights, and stood by the window looking at the moonlight on the front lawn. The same lawn where James used to run barefoot, where he once gave me a dandelion and called it a forever flower. And now he'd brought a woman into my life who tried to erase all that. But she didn't win. She never would. Because this home, this legacy was mine, and I wasn't done protecting it. Not even close. It started with a dinner invitation. Lacey texted me directly, something she hadn't done since our confrontation. We'd love for you to join us Friday night at your place. James says he misses your cooking. We'll bring wine. My gut reaction was to ignore it. But then I remembered what Mr. Halperin said. Keep the door open just enough for them to hang themselves with their own rope. So I replied, of course. See you at 7. I spent the day preparing the way my mother once taught me, slowly, intentionally. Beef stew simmering on the stove, soft jazz playing in the background. The table set with real napkins and proper silverware. Everything in its place. I even lit the good candles. But something in me stayed sharp, watchful. And when they arrived, both dressed like they were attending a business dinner, not a home-cooked meal, I knew I'd made the right choice. Because this wasn't just a family visit. It was a stage. The evening started pleasantly enough. Lacey poured wine. James complimented the food. Lacey laughed at my old stories like she'd been there for them. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe, maybe just maybe, they were trying to make peace. Then the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Lacey said, already rising from her chair. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I stepped into the hallway, she was greeting a man in a navy blazer. Young, confident, carrying a leather folio. He stepped forward and extended his hand. Mrs. Dalton, I'm Aaron from Willow and Blake Realty. I blinked. Realty? Yes, he said. Lacey said you were looking to explore the potential value of your home for resale or refinancing. I've pulled the comps and preliminary assessments. My blood ran cold. Lacey smiled radiant and composed. Just a quick chat, she said. No pressure. I didn't speak. I simply walked back to the dining room, pulled out the chair, and sat. They followed. The realtor opened his folder. This neighborhood's seeing a serious uptick in demand, he said enthusiastically. Between the school zone and proximity to the hospital, we could list this property at nearly $870,000, possibly more. James sat stiffly, his glass untouched. Now the man continued. If you were to transfer the property to a family member or co-resident prior to listing, you could avoid some of the tax liability and streamline the process. Lacey leaned forward. I explained to Aaron that we'd be handling the paperwork, we just wanted to understand the current value. I stared at her. You explained to him, did you? I asked quietly. I didn't mean anything by it, she said. Just information gathering, being proactive. You brought a realtor into my home, I said, each word slow, deliberate, without my consent. Without even a warning. James looked at her. You told me she agreed to this. She blinked. I thought she would once she saw I stood. And something in the air cracked. I want you out of my house, I said. Maggie, don't overreact, I set out. The realtor looked startled, but he stood quickly. Of course, I'll be in touch. James didn't move, but Lacey. She froze, calculating. Then she smiled slowly. Well, she said, adjusting her blouse, I suppose I misread the situation. No, I said, you didn't. You just thought I was too old, too tired, or too sentimental to stop you. I turned to James. And you let her turn your childhood home into a bargaining chip. He looked pale. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't want to know. They left together. No apologies, no backward glances, only silence. I stood at the door, breathing deeply, letting the truth settle around me like dust. She wasn't done. I could feel it. But neither was I. She had tried charm. She had tried guilt. She had tried real estate agents and paperwork dressed as love. Now she would turn to something darker. And I had to be ready. I walked into my study, opened the drawer, and pulled out a notebook. Title page, document everything. That night, I began recording every interaction, every phone call, every detail, because the game wasn't over, and I wasn't going to lose. Not my house, not my name, not the legacy I'd built from scratch with my bare hands and my husband's last breath. Not to a woman who thought she could smile and steal everything. I bought the camera the next morning, a discreet little thing small enough to fit in the corner of the bookshelf near my study. It was motion-activated, high-resolution, and cloud-synced. No wires, no blinking lights, completely silent. I didn't tell anyone, because if Lacey was bold enough to bring a realtor into my home without my permission, I knew it was only a matter of time before she came back alone. And this time, I wanted proof. For 3 days, nothing happened. James didn't call. Lacey didn't text. The silence felt like a paused chess game, her knight frozen mid-move, waiting to see how I'd respond. I kept my routines. Morning tea at 7:30, gardening after breakfast, reading in the sunroom. Every now and then, I'd glance at the camera feed on my phone. Empty hallway, empty study, empty frame, until the 4th day. It was just after 3 p.m. when the alert buzzed my phone. Motion detected. Study camera 1. I was at the grocery store. My hands froze on a bunch of bananas. I opened the feed. There she was. Lacey. Inside my house. Alone. No knock. No call. No warning. She moved with purpose. Straight to the study. Her purse slung across her shoulder. Her hair tied up her eyes, scanning the room like she owned it. She checked the desk drawers first. then the bookshelf, then the filing cabinet. Nothing. But when she walked to the side table near the couch, the one where I sometimes kept the legal folders temporarily, she smiled and pulled out her phone. I watched as she took photos. Every page, every sticky note, every highlighted line in the margins. She wasn't even subtle about it. Then she carefully put everything back, wiped the table down with a tissue, and walked out as if nothing had happened. I rushed home. She was long gone by the time I arrived. But the camera had caught everything. Date, time, face, evidence. I saved the footage to a drive, made 3 copies, gave one to Mr. Halperin. One went into a locked safe deposit box. The last stayed with me. Now if she ever claimed innocence, I had her. Breaking and entering, unauthorized access to legal documents, intent to defraud, all of it in crystal clear video. 2 nights later, James came by. Alone. He looked hollow, tired in a way that went beyond fatigue. We sat on the porch. The wind was picking up, the sky heavy with the weight of rain. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said. I didn't speak. I let the silence settle. "She says you're manipulating me," he continued. "That you're trying to drive a wedge between us because you're afraid of being alone." I turned to look at him. "And what do you believe?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Is it true that you recorded her?" I stared straight ahead. "Yes." His head dropped into his hands. "She said it's all out of context." I walked inside and came back with the USB stick. "Take this," I said. "Watch it. Decide for yourself." He hesitated, then took it. Later that night, he called. No words at first, just breathing. Then softly I saw it. She said she only did it to protect me, that you'd never give me anything unless she pushed. "She's right," I said. "I wouldn't give it to her. And I still won't." Silence. Then I think I need some time. And just like that, click. Call ended. The next day I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. It was handwritten in delicate, slanted script. "You think you've won, but you've only slowed me down. James will come around. And when he does, this house will be ours. You can die in it or leave it to us. But either way, you'll be gone eventually. L." No envelope, just folded neatly, left like a calling card. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I filed it away and called my lawyer again. "This," I said, reading it aloud, "is not just harassment. It's a threat." He agreed. We updated the file, filed a formal notice with the police. No charges yet, not unless she trespassed again, but now there was a record. And that mattered. Because people like Lacey think silence is weakness. But I know better. Silence is just preparation. That evening, I walked around the house slowly, touching the banister my husband carved by hand, the spot on the kitchen wall where James once scribbled with crayons and I left it there, painted around it. The worn spot on the porch step where I sit every spring and read. They wanted this house, but they didn't understand it. This place is more than real estate. It's memory, blood, love, history, and it won't be signed away. Not now. Not ever. The following morning, I stood in front of the mirror studying myself the way a general might before battle. 66 years. Lines around my eyes, faint creases at the corners of my mouth, a few age spots dotting my hands. But I wasn't weak. I wasn't losing my grip. I wasn't senile or confused. And I certainly wasn't finished. By 10 a.m., I was seated across from Mr. Halperin in his office again. The envelope Lacey left in my mailbox sat sealed between us. "She's crossed into criminal territory now," he said calmly. "Do we press charges?" "Not yet," he said, tapping a finger on the letter. "Let her feel confident. Let her take the next step. Then we hit her with everything. What do you suggest?" He pulled out a legal pad and began writing. A codicil. It would amend my existing will legally solid, undisputable. And with it I would place temporary control of my estate in case of illness or death, not with James, and certainly not with Lacey, but with someone else. Someone they wouldn't expect. The next day I met with Diane. She'd been my neighbor and closest friend for 20 years. Widowed, fiercely loyal, a former paralegal. When I told her what I wanted, her eyes widened. "You want me to be your estate proxy?" she asked, stunned. "Yes." She shook her head. "Why not James?" "Because I don't trust who James has become." She understood. Immediately, quietly. "I'll do it," she said. "But are you sure this will cause waves?" "There are already waves," I replied. "I'm just learning how to swim through them." The documents were signed and notarized within 48 hours. Now, even if something happened to me, Lacey couldn't get her claws into the house. Diane would have full legal authority. And I didn't stop there. I added a clause. If any attempt was made even indirectly to manipulate, coerce, or defraud me during my lifetime, that person would be immediately and permanently excluded from the will. No appeals, no loopholes, just silence and absence. James called that night. His voice was cautious, flat. "She's upset," he said. "She says you're escalating things." "I'm protecting myself," I replied. "I know. I just—" He paused. "She wants to meet. Just the three of us. One last conversation." I didn't answer right away. "Then here. Tomorrow. Noon." They arrived precisely on time. Lacey wore white again, as if purity could be mimicked in fabric. James looked like he hadn't slept. I didn't offer coffee or pleasantries. We sat in the living room, the silence thick. Lacey spoke first. "I think we've all made mistakes," she said smoothly. "Things have gotten out of hand. But I want to clear the air." I folded my hands. "Do go on." She looked at James, then back at me. "I'm sorry if I came across too strong. I was trying to help, to create a stable plan for the future. That's all. By bringing a realtor into my house without asking." "That was James's idea," she said quickly. He flinched. Just a little. "And the letter I asked." Her eyes narrowed. "What letter?" "The one you left in my mailbox. The one I've already submitted to the police." Her expression froze. I let the silence stretch. James looked at her. "You left her a letter?" he asked. "She's making that up," Lacey said sharply. "Trying to turn you against me." "I have your handwriting," I said calmly. "And I have the camera footage of you going through my legal documents." James's breath caught. "You—" "What, she broke into my home?" I said, voice flat. "I have video, time-stamped, uploaded to the cloud. Copies in 3 places. Would you like to see it?" Lacey stood suddenly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's framing me." "I'm not framing you," I said. "I'm exposing you." She turned to James. "Tell her to stop. Tell her she's overreacting." But James just stared at her. And for the first time I saw it: recognition. Clarity. The fog lifting. He stood. "I think you should leave," he said. "What? You heard me?" he said, his voice low. "You need to leave." She looked between us, the predator finally realizing the prey was no longer afraid. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said. "It is." And I opened the door. She walked out. No bags. No final threats. Just silence. James stood there for a long moment. Then he sank into the armchair like a man whose lungs had just collapsed. "I let her in," he said. "I let her use me." "You were manipulated," I said gently. "It happens." "No," he whispered. "I ignored the signs. You tried to warn me, and I made you the villain." We sat in silence. Then I stood. "You'll need to work to rebuild my trust," I said. "I will," he promised. "If you'll let me. We'll see." And I meant it. Because forgiveness isn't automatic. Sometimes it has to be earned. The house was quiet again, not the kind of silence that clings like dread, the kind I'd been living with for weeks, but something softer, like exhaling after holding your breath far too long. But trust. That didn't come back with the silence. Not yet. James started coming by more often, small visits. He brought groceries, fixed the squeaky gate, sat with me on the porch and asked questions like, "What was Dad like when you met him?" I wanted to believe this was his way of returning. But my heart was cautious now, tender like skin healing from a burn. A week after Lacey walked out, I received a phone call from my lawyer. "There's been an attempt to pull your property record," Mr. Halperin said. My stomach tightened. From whom? Block name. But I've secured a freeze on the file just in case. Nothing can be edited or transferred without your physical presence and signature. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. So, she wasn't done. Just lurking. Waiting. Watching for a crack. 2 days later, I opened the front door to find a plain envelope taped to the screen. No name. Inside a single sheet of paper. "Drop the charges or the video goes public." You yelling. Paranoid. Aggressive. Not a good look for a grieving widow. "You won't survive the embarrassment." No signature. But the words dripped with her venom. She thought shame would scare me, that I'd trade my dignity for peace. She didn't realize I had already lived through worse. I had buried the love of my life, endured the slow erosion of my son's trust, and watched someone walk through my memories like they were browsing a store shelf. I wasn't scared. I was furious. I called Mr. Halperin and handed over the note. Then I made a second call to my friend Claire, who ran the local elder advocacy group. Within days, I was booked to speak at a closed community meeting recognizing financial manipulation in family dynamics. I stood in front of 20 strangers and told them everything. About the smile that hid the blade, the forms disguised as help, the realtor at my dinner table, the break-in, the pressure, and the shame. But I told them something else too. I didn't lose everything I said. Because I documented. I prepared. And I stopped apologizing for saying no. People cried. People stood and clapped. After the meeting, 3 women came up and said, "That's happening to me too." A week later, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. No threats this time. Just paperwork. Filed under Monroe Lacey. Petition for restraining order. She was trying to flip the script, claiming I'd harassed her, sent messages, followed her. A smear attempt, fast, vicious, and paper-thin. I called Mr. Halperin. He laughed. "We'll file a response counterclaim and petition for defamation." She just handed us her weakness. But it wasn't the paperwork that rattled me. It was James. Because this meant she wasn't letting go of him either. I waited 2 days. Then asked James to come over. He arrived mid-afternoon. No flowers, no apologies. Just him. We sat in the living room. "I need you to hear something," I said. I played the voicemail Lacey had left on my old phone weeks ago, the one where she whispered, "If you don't sign, I'll make sure you won't be trusted by anyone. Not even your own son." When it ended, James looked like he'd been punched. "I kept this," I said, "because I knew you wouldn't believe me otherwise." He stared at the rug. "I believed you too late." I didn't say anything. "I stayed because I wanted her to be who I thought she was," he whispered. "And I let her twist me into a version of myself I don't even recognize." He looked up. "I want to make things right." I stood, walked over to the shelf and pulled down a dusty photo album. Opened it to a picture of us, him at 5, me 20 years younger, holding him as he clutched a plastic dinosaur. "You see this?" I said. He nodded. "That's the version of you I protected then. And I will always protect him." I closed the book. "But now I need you to protect me." He stood. And for the first time in months, maybe years, he walked over and hugged me. Tightly. Not out of guilt, out of understanding, out of choice. That night, I updated my will again. Not out of fear, out of peace. The house was no longer in danger, but more importantly, I wasn't. Because the people who think they can outmaneuver gaslight and guilt trip their way into someone else's life forget one thing: older doesn't mean weaker. And silence doesn't mean surrender. Lacey filed 3 motions in the weeks that followed. First, she tried to claim I was mentally declining a desperate, predictable swipe meant to call into question my ability to make legal decisions. Second, she submitted a petition to mediate over James's future inheritance, implying that I had promised them the house verbally. That one didn't even make it past the first clerk. And the third, a formal defamation complaint based on my speech at the Elder Protection Group. That was her biggest mistake. Because now she'd taken what was private and dragged it into the light. Mr. Halperin moved quickly. We compiled the camera footage, the recordings, the handwriting analysis on the anonymous letters, and the digital logs of her unauthorized entries into my home. Then we filed a counterclaim with full evidence accusing her of attempted fraud, undue influence, harassment, trespassing. And then we made one final move, a cease and desist order with a public record. Lacey Monroe's name was now searchable, and she knew it. The morning she was served, I was in the garden trimming my hydrangeas. Diane called me from her porch. She just stormed out of her apartment building like a wasp in a hurricane. I smiled. Then I suppose it's working? Later that day, James called. She's gone, he said. Packed up, moved out. I sat down on the porch swing and closed my eyes. Did she say anything? He sighed. Only that I'd regret choosing you. I opened my eyes. And do you? No, he said. Not anymore. That evening, I made chicken pot pie, the kind James always begged for on birthdays when he was a kid. He arrived just after 7, shoulders slumped, face weathered. But there was something new in his eyes, softness, humility. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten. Mom, I'm sorry I didn't see her clearly. I'm sorry I let her use me. I'm sorry I almost let her steal everything you built. I'm not asking for your trust back overnight. But I'll earn it. If it takes years, I'll still be here. Love, James. I folded the letter slowly and held it in both hands. I believe you, I said. He blinked. You do, I do. But believing and forgetting are 2 different things. He nodded. I'll prove it. In the weeks that followed, James showed up nearly every day. He fixed the porch railing, cleaned out the gutters, repaired the back fence that had been falling for months. Not because I needed him to, but because he needed to rebuild. One morning, I found a sticky note on the fridge. Hydrangeas are blooming. Looks like you again. Jay. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe there's something sacred in slow forgiveness. But the real surprise came from Diane. She knocked on my door one afternoon and handed me a thick manila folder. What's this? I asked. A background file on Lacey Monroe. I had some old contacts in legal records run a search. I opened it slowly. Inside, sealed court documents, 3 similar complaints from different women, older relatives of past boyfriends, each filed and buried, each too ashamed to pursue it. She's done this before, I whispered. She'll try again, Diane said. Somewhere else. But this time, I wasn't just a woman who survived her. I was a woman who stopped her. And that's when I knew what I had to do. Not just protect myself, but speak louder, make it harder for people like her to keep winning in silence. So I partnered with Claire's elder advocacy group. I began speaking at community centers, sharing my story not with shame, but with power. And every time I told it, I ended the same way. If someone is circling you with kindness, laced in control, trust your instinct. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't owe access to anyone, not even family, especially not family who believe your home is something they're entitled to. The house is quiet again now, but the silence feels earned, and inside it is something steady, something whole, something like peace. It was a soft rain that morning, the kind that taps gently on the windows and makes the whole world feel suspended. I was sipping my tea when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. The voice on the other end was thin but steady. "Is this Margaret Dalton?" "Yes." "Who's calling?" "My name is Beverly," the woman said. Her voice carried a subtle tremor, the kind that comes not from fear but from exhaustion. "I read about what happened to you. In the newsletter. The Elder Circle. I think—" She paused. "I think something similar is happening to me." I sat up straighter. My grandson's girlfriend moved in a few months ago. At first she was lovely. She made tea, helped organize the pantry, even offered to drive me to appointments. The breath on the other end of the line caught. But then, the tone shifted. Suddenly, I couldn't access my own online banking. I couldn't find the key to the drawer where I keep my documents. And yesterday she told me she thinks the house should be restructured, that I should gift it to them now for tax reasons. She said it's what families do when they love each other. I swallowed hard. "I'm not crazy," Beverly whispered. "Right." "No," I said gently. "You're not crazy at all." That one phone call became 5 within the week, then 10, then nearly 24. Women from all over town, some older than me, some barely into their 60s, reached out to say, "I thought it was just me. I thought my daughter was being helpful." But then I realized she changed the name on my utility account. "I thought my niece just wanted me to downsize, but she's already planning to rent out the second bedroom to a friend." The stories were different in their details, but the blueprint was the same. A slow erosion of independence, a calculated planting of fear, a smile masking a takeover. I saw echoes of Lacey in all of them, not just in the manipulation, but in the language, just trying to help. "You deserve rest. Wouldn't it be easier if someone else handled things? I couldn't stay quiet." With Claire's encouragement, I launched a local support circle. We called it Legacy Protectors. A simple name, but it resonated. Every week, more chairs filled at the library conference room we'd borrowed. Folding tables, coffee from a tin percolator. Not glamorous, but sacred. The women came hesitantly at first. Some sat in silence for the first few meetings, their arms crossed tight over their chests. But eventually, the walls began to lower. "I didn't want to believe my son's wife was manipulating me," one woman said, voice cracking. "But she cornered me with papers after dinner one night. Told me I'd feel better if I just signed." We listened, nodded, held space. Others spoke of legal documents disappearing, keys quietly replaced, family members who stopped visiting once they couldn't get what they wanted. It was more common than I'd ever feared. And no one talked about it, because no one wanted to admit they'd been betrayed by their own. One evening, after a particularly heavy meeting, I came home to find James waiting on my porch. He stood when I approached, holding a large, padded envelope. "I brought something," he said softly. I let him in, and we sat at the dining table as he slid the contents out. Photographs. Dozens of them. Some old black and white ones of me and his father as newlyweds, our arms around each other at the lake. Others more recent, James as a toddler in the sandbox, his 7th birthday party with frosting on his nose, the two of us on a hayride one autumn. "I didn't know she took these," I said, voice shaking. "She packed them when she moved out," he said. "Said they needed to be preserved." I found them stuffed in a bin in the back of her car. Labeled trash. I laid my hand over the pictures. My throat burned, but I didn't let the tears fall. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded. "I'm so sorry, Mom." That night, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug with the photos spread out in front of me. I pulled out the old albums. Dust clung to the covers, but the pages still turned easily. One by one, I returned the photos to their places. I replaced the cracked glass in a few frames, rewrote the fading labels beneath the snapshots, repaired the small tear on the one where James was blowing bubbles in the backyard. It felt like rebuilding a part of my soul that Lacey had tried to erase. A few mornings later, James showed up again. This time with a duffel bag and a sheepish smile. "I gave up my lease," he said. "Just for a little while, if that's okay." I looked at him. Older now, quieter, but something new in his posture, a softness he'd lost. Humility. "Your room's still there," I said. That night, as I passed his door and saw the faint glow of a bedside lamp under it, the same lamp he used to read under as a child, I felt something in me settle. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come all at once. Maybe it's layered like seasons returning in slow, familiar rhythms. A few days after that, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a velvet box. I opened it and stared. It was the gold necklace, my mother's heirloom, the one I had passed to James years ago to give to the woman he chose to marry. The one Lacey had worn proudly at the first dinner she ever had in my house. No note, no apology, just the necklace. It didn't feel like remorse. It felt like a retreat, a silent admission of defeat. I held it for a moment, then closed the box gently and tucked it into the back of the drawer in my bedroom. It wasn't hers anymore, and truthfully, it never really had been. Spring arrived slowly that year, like a reluctant apology after a season of cruelty. My garden, long neglected during the chaos, began to bloom again, little green promises pushing through the soil. The cherry tree out front, planted in James's childhood, opened its first pink blossoms like a sigh of relief. Everything felt quieter. But I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because people like Lacey don't disappear. They recalibrate. And somewhere behind all her silence, I could feel the tension still humming like a wasp trapped behind glass, waiting for a crack to sting through. But life moved on. The support group Diane and I had started, Legacy Protectors, was no longer just an informal gathering of wounded women. It was becoming something larger, more structured, more determined. Each week, more people showed up. They came with documents in hand, fear in their eyes, and stories tucked in their throats that needed safe places to land. And we made room. For the woman who was nearly tricked into co-signing a reverse mortgage by her niece's fiancé. For the man who hadn't spoken in weeks, holding a stack of credit card statements opened in his name by a helpful grandson. For the retired nurse who said softly, "He told me if I loved him, I'd make him co-owner." These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern. James attended every meeting quietly. He never stood up to speak. Never tried to explain or redeem. He just listened. He helped fold chairs, pass out flyers, refill coffee pots. He was showing up in the only way he could, and I appreciated that far more than any grand gesture. One afternoon, he stayed behind while I closed up the community center. I caught him staring at one of the flyers, "How to secure your property title legally without pressure." He traced the paper with one finger slowly. "She did this to others, didn't she?" he asked. I nodded. His voice dropped. "I let her do it to you." I turned off the last light and stood beside him. "You also stopped her," I said. "Eventually." He swallowed. "Too late. Too late to stop the pain," I said. "But not too late to heal." And that healing was becoming real. It wasn't just mine anymore. It was shared. The library board approved a monthly elder protection seminar led by Legacy Protectors. Local attorneys volunteered time. A real estate agent offered free consultations for homeowners unsure of what they'd signed. One woman who'd remained silent for 3 meetings finally stood up and said I got a restraining order against my son-in-law. And I didn't cry in court. The room erupted in applause. I've rarely felt more proud. Then one Thursday morning, I received a call that brought everything back. "Mrs. Dalton," a calm voice asked. "My name is Carol McIntyre. I'm an attorney with the Hughes family. I believe you were once associated with a woman named Lacey Monroe. The air around me thickened. Yes, I said. We're preparing to file a civil suit. A relative of my client experienced what we believe to be financial coercion and attempted property fraud, nearly identical to what we've heard from other sources. I was already sitting, but my legs still tensed. Lacey was romantically involved with their grandson, Carol continued. They believe she followed a pattern, and your name was mentioned in one of her emails. Would you be willing to share a statement? Possibly testify if it proceeds to court? For a moment, I said nothing. Then, yes, absolutely. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching dusk settle between the trees. Diane joined me as she often did now, sipping chamomile tea like it was a shield. She's still out there, I said. People like her always are, Diane replied. But now she has a name, a history, a public trail. She'll find someone else, I whispered. Maybe, but not without warning signs now, not without noise. You made noise, Maggie, and the silence is cracking. That night, I found myself pulling out the old newspaper clippings from the first time our support group made headlines. There I was, hair slightly disheveled, wearing the same cardigan I'd owned for 20 years, standing at a podium with my mouth half open and eyes full of fire. The headline read, Local Widow Sparks Movement to Protect Elder Property Rights. It had felt surreal then. A woman like me, just a retired teacher, a quiet widow, a mother who had nearly lost everything now helping others reclaim power. But reading it again now, it felt earned. Not a spotlight, a lighthouse. 3 days later, another package arrived. No return address. At first I thought maybe it was another anonymous threat. Another dig from Lacey trying to find a crack to exploit. But inside was something unexpected. A necklace. Gold. Simple. Familiar. It was my mother's necklace, the one I had gifted James years ago to give to the woman he chose, the one Lacey used to wear. I stared at it for a long time, my hands unmoving. No note. No apology. Just the weight of it heavy in my palm. I didn't know whether she meant it as remorse or mockery, but it didn't matter. Because it wasn't hers anymore. It never truly had been. I placed it back in its original box, the velvet still soft despite the years, and stored it in the back of my dresser. Not to hide it, to preserve it. Some things deserve to rest where they belong. That weekend we hosted the largest Legacy Protectors gathering yet. Over 130 people packed into the community center. There were folding chairs in the hallway, elderly couples holding hands. A man in his 80s who stood up and said, My niece forged my signature on the refinance loan, but after I heard about Margaret, I got it reversed. I took my house back. I cried then. Openly. Unashamed. And I wasn't the only one. We weren't victims anymore. We were witnesses. And warriors. As the meeting ended, I stepped aside and took in the room. People hugging, laughing, comparing notes, taking photos beside the banner James had made, This house is not yours to take. I felt something inside me settle, not because everything was perfect, not because pain had vanished, but because I knew the legacy of my house was no longer in the bricks. It was in the voices rising from within it. The day James moved back into the house, it rained. Not a storm, just a steady, quiet drizzle that misted the windows and softened the edges of the world. He didn't bring much. A suitcase, a box of books, a framed photo of the two of us from years ago, taken on a road trip we'd almost canceled, but didn't one of the last truly joyful days before everything changed. I won't stay forever, he said as he stood at the threshold. Just long enough to earn back what I lost. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and let him in. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in the house. It wasn't just the return of footsteps upstairs or the sound of the kettle boiling twice instead of once. It was the quiet moments, the new rhythm. We started having breakfast together again. He never apologized in grand words, but he was different now. He asked how I slept. He helped water the garden. He repaired the sagging back gate without me having to ask. Small things, but real. There was still pain between us, a gap not easily crossed, but every day he stayed, it narrowed. And I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost my son after all. One evening, I found him in the garage organizing the boxes I'd kept untouched for years. Inside one of them was a folder marked M+J, third grade. He opened it and pulled out a wrinkled drawing, two stick figures holding hands in front of a big red house. The caption read, "Me and Mommy's forever home." He didn't say a word, just handed it to me. I took it and pressed it to my chest. Some words don't need saying. The lawsuit against Lacey moved forward in quiet, methodical steps. I gave my deposition. So did others. Her pattern became clear, charming, a family member isolating the older relative, inserting herself into legal and financial conversations, pushing property transfers, then disappearing when resistance grew. The Hughes family's case was airtight. It wouldn't put her in prison, but it would make her radioactive to any future attempts. Her reputation was finally catching up with her. James didn't attend the hearings. He didn't want to see her again. I didn't blame him. Instead, he helped build something better starting right at home. Legacy Protectors had become a registered nonprofit. Claire took care of the legal side, Diane led outreach, and I began writing a column in the local paper, The Guarded Gate Stories from Women Who Said No. We shared letters, testimonials, and advice. Sometimes the stories were brutal, other times healing, but always, always honest. And through it, we were giving permission for boundaries, for clarity, for voice. James helped design the logo. A house with a tree growing beside it, roots spreading wide. The motto underneath read, "Protect what built you." One weekend, he and I took a drive to the coast. We hadn't done something like that in years. We didn't talk about the past much on that trip, but we didn't avoid it either. Sitting on a bench overlooking the sea, he asked quietly, "Did you ever think about selling the house?" Leaving it all behind, I thought about it. "Yes," I said, for about 5 seconds. He nodded. I didn't understand it. Then he said, "Why it meant so much. But I do now." "It's not about the property," I said. "It's about the memory, the blood, the fight. It's about knowing that I'm not just protecting 4 walls. I'm protecting a story." He nodded again. This time, he understood. When we returned home, a surprise was waiting. Diane and Claire stood in the kitchen with flowers and envelopes. "What's all this?" I asked. Diane grinned. "We submitted your name for the Golden Oak Award." My eyebrows lifted. The what now? It's given to women over 60 who've made significant contributions to community justice and advocacy. I laughed. "I'm not a figurehead." "You're a fortress," Claire said simply. And in that moment, I felt something shift. I wasn't just the woman who had something stolen from her and fought back. I was the woman who turned that fight into a movement. That night, James found me on the porch. "I saw something today," he said. He handed me his phone. It was a real estate listing. Lacey's name appeared in the fine print quietly attached to a failed development in another county. The comments were brutal. Mentions of fraud, complaints of unreturned calls, a thread speculating about her involvement in 3 other shady deals. "She's burning every bridge," he said. I stared at the screen. No satisfaction, just finality. "She doesn't matter anymore," I said. "Let her fall on her own." "I just wanted you to know," he said. "I do," I replied. "And I'm glad." Weeks passed. The cherry tree bloomed in full. James started working with the county office helping coordinate programs for elder legal aid. Diane was interviewed on the local radio. Legacy Protectors received its first grant. The house felt lighter somehow, not because its past was erased, but because its future was being rewritten. One day, I stood in the living room, sunlight pouring through the window, and realized something. For so long, I had seen my home as something to guard. Now I saw it as something to share. Not the building, the lesson. The strength. The reminder that no matter how deeply someone tries to manipulate or take from you, you can stand up. You can fight back. You can say, no, this is mine. That night, I took out the necklace again. My mother's. The one that passed through too many hands, one pair undeserving. I clipped it around my neck, looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not politely, not to be brave. I smiled because I was proud, because I was still here, because I had protected what mattered and taught others to do the same. And because finally, the house was full again, not just with people, but with peace. They say a house remembers, that its walls hold the echo of every footstep, every argument, every whispered prayer uttered in the still of night. And I believe that now more than ever. Because when I walk through this home, my home, I can feel it breathing around me, not with fear, not with tension, but with something softer. Peace. It's been nearly a year since Lacey tried to steal what wasn't hers. Since the first hint of her quiet manipulation slithered through my front door wrapped in charm and false kindness. Sometimes I still sit in the living room staring at the armchair where she once smiled and handed me helpful paperwork, and I feel a small shiver. Not from fear, from awe. Awe that I nearly let her take everything, and awe that I didn't. James lives upstairs now, though he's working toward finding his own place nearby. He's careful about it, slow, thoughtful, like everything he does now. He cooks breakfast on Sundays, brings me coffee in the mornings when I forget to make it, and leaves little notes around the house when he knows I've had a long day. One read just last week. Thank you for giving me a second chance. It was taped to the fridge next to a photo of him at age 6 grinning with a missing tooth. There's still work to do between us. Trust once broken doesn't rebuild overnight. But with each gesture, each conversation, each unspoken apology and earned moment of respect, we are learning how to be mother and son again. As adults, as equals, as survivors of the same storm. Legacy Protectors has expanded far beyond what I ever imagined. We now have a newsletter, a small website, and volunteers in 6 counties. The local university's law school asked me to speak at a seminar this fall. Me, a retired elementary school teacher in her 60s, standing at a podium teaching young future lawyers how to spot coercion, hiding behind a smile. It still surprises me sometimes. I never planned to become anything more than a woman who fought to keep her home. But when you speak up, your voice echoes further than you think. And now, every time someone says, I thought I was the only one, I get to look them in the eye and say, you're not. One evening, Diane and I sat on the porch blankets over our knees, the sun setting behind the trees like the end of a long day, finally exhaling. She reached for my hand. You know, she said, you're a lighthouse now. I laughed. Hardly. No, she said, squeezing gently. You are. You went through hell. You stood in the dark. And now you're guiding people home. I didn't answer right away, because sometimes the truth is too big to accept in one breath. But I believed her, and that belief carried weight. James recently showed me the preliminary sketches for a community center proposal, a place where seniors can go for free legal advice, therapy, and financial education. He wants to name it after his father. The Dalton House, he said. A different kind of house. One that protects people the way you protected me. I nodded. I didn't have the words then, but my chest swelled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years, pride that doesn't come from recognition, but from redemption. He's come so far. And while a part of me will always grieve the boy I once lost to manipulation, I'm learning to embrace the man who fought his way back. That's a different kind of miracle. As for Lacey, I hear whispers now and then. She's resurfaced in another city, under a new name. but her reputation follows her now like a shadow she can't outrun. No one wins forever on lies. Eventually, the truth catches up. And I no longer need revenge. Because what she gave me without meaning to was a gift. She sharpened me. She cracked me open, and in doing so let something stronger grow. Not just resilience, but voice. And that she will never take away. Some nights when the house is quiet and I'm curled up in my old reading chair, I run my fingers along the edge of the property deed now secured in a fireproof box under lock and key. Not because I'm afraid someone will try to take it again, but because it reminds me what I fought for. This isn't just a house, it's a history. It's where my husband's laughter still lingers in the floorboards, where James's tiny handprint remains in the cement step out back, where the seasons come and go but the roots stay firm. I've protected this place not just for me, but for every woman who's ever been told she's too emotional, too forgetful, too old to matter. And to anyone listening now to you, I want you to hear this clearly. If someone's smile feels too wide, if their help feels like a leash, if you feel like you're slowly being erased from your own life, you are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not powerless. I don't know where this road will go next. Maybe one day James will marry someone kind and honest, someone who loves him for who he is, not what he can offer. Maybe one day I'll sell this house not out of fear or pressure, but choice on my terms in my time. Or maybe I'll stay here until my hair turns silver white and the stairs creak louder than my knees. Either way, I will know this: I stood my ground. I kept my name on the deed. I reclaimed my story. And I helped others find the strength to do the same. So if you've made it this far, thank you truly. Your time, your attention, your heart. They mean something to me. And if this story reminds you of your own or of someone you love, don't stay silent. Share it. Speak it. Because silence is where people like Lacey thrive. And truth is what sets them on fire. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own experience in the comments. I read every word, and you're never alone here.